Okay, let me know if you guys can hear me. Volume on, yes? Oh, okay. Good. Okay. Let me know if you guys can hear me. So my parents were staying with us for about a week, and they are heading out today. Sadly, I'm trying to convince them to stay longer because, I'm like, don't go back to California. It's like just not settling this week, but I'm not able to convince them to stay longer, unfortunately. My dad is taking off, so we're good. So I was just going to set this up here to do a quick live. I typically go to my dad for any kind of comfort and advice. I still go to dad even though I'm in my 30s, just have that kind of relationship. Hold on, this cutter's in the way here. Okay, so yeah, we can kind of start right now. I know it's going to wait for more people to jump on, but I also don't want to take up your time, your day. So that's 50 people on right now. So yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Okay, so Dad, I wanted you to share your story about the earthquake that you and Mom survived.
Yeah, well, before coming to the United States, we were living in the Philippines. There are 3 islands in the Philippines: Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao. We lived in the northern island, which is the island of Luzon, and of course that Philippine archipelago is notorious for earthquakes, but we haven't had one in years. So when I was growing up, I guess the last earthquake that we had was in the 1960s, where it leveled a tower in a nearby city. It was really strong, and that was that. And when we got to 1990, Malu and myself, my wife and myself, we decided to go up to a mountain region, a mountain province called Baguio. And in Baguio, we had planned to stay there for 3 days. And it's the summer capital of our country. If you want to enjoy the cold climate and do hikes and whatever. So that's where we went.
So you left the kids. You had all 3 of us with
We
you.
had the kids in the mainland down in Manila, the lowlands we call it, and so since it was going to be a quick trip, so we're up in Baguio. On the 3rd day, we decided, okay, it's time to go home. And again, this was in 1990. It was about maybe 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and we had friends that were with us, locals living in Baguio, and this couple said, "No, you've got to go. Let's have some." We call it in the Philippines. We call it merienda. This is like a meal between lunch and dinner. We call it merienda. So well, let's have merienda over at a lobby. We can have a good bite, dessert, maybe coffee. So to the hotel mezzanine, I decided that's really, I don't want to travel with a full stomach. Malu also decided to prolong our stay, and so we did that with me. And then after 20-30 minutes to go, and then these friends of ours said, well, we have a shop that over items, and that shop before you head down.
Can you explain the Mount Baguio?
To go up to Baguio, we have, which is relatively new, we have the Nagilian Road, which is further north, and we have the main road up Baguio. It's called Kenon Road. Is a road that was built by and they just, Kenon Road is a zigzag for these to get up today. I mean, people just get, it's quite rough. But Cannon Road was the road that we were going to take to go home. Even there, we said yes to our friends on Hill. That's where they had their silver. So we go to the silver shop, admiring the and such. And while we were enjoying our time at this silver shop, then we a rumble beneath us, and then the entire place, but moved sideways, not up and down, but moved sideways like a huge boat. And it was a violent, the jealousies of we call it jealousies, or let's call it windows of the shop started to, our windows that open this way, and it's all made of glass. And that was of that shop. It's just shattered, you know. They started to shatter. The tall display, and it was a violent crash. It was not just it just didn't boom. It just, and so that was happening all around us.
So
we're in the middle of the shop.
What are you guys doing? Just holding on to each other? What happened?
Well, Malu had to get on the floor because she was losing and fell on the floor. In my mind, presence of mind, I said, help me, I am to die. I just remember saying that. I took off my leather jacket, I put it over Malu, moved her under the door jambs of the shop way, and I stayed on that. I got my friends to join. We just weathered this earthquake until it passed. Good, almost 40 seconds to 60 seconds. Of course, you know, when people get into earthquakes, they'll say, well, it was like forever. It was like it was all in slow motion, and it was. I had the store people, women, men, at my feet, also crouched under the door jamb. It was a big door jamb, so it could accommodate a lot of people, and that was the very place that they went. That was probably the door jamb is the most sound structure to be under during such times, because in the middle of the shop it was just the display case after the other toppling over. And they were praying in their language, and I can hear them. They were praying, they were crying out for help. You know, God help us in the Filipino language. It was a really horrific time, and not just in the store, but even outside. You can hear the screams of people. The population was just overwhelmed by the event. Right after the initial shock hit us, and I must say, later on we discovered that it was 8.5 magnitude earthquake. So that 8.5 quake is enough to topple buildings and destroy homes. We didn't know it at the time, but it was so violent that no doubt it was that strong magnitude. So initially, we ran up, when everything subsided, a friend of mine, myself, ran up to a nearby home to start looking for fire extinguishers just in case a fire broke out. So we went into the home, and I'm telling you, we couldn't even enter the kitchen. We had to push our way into the kitchen because the refrigerator from one end of the kitchen just rolled over to the other end, and the stove rolled over to the other end. Appliances just, Everything was all over the place. Well, we couldn't find the extinguisher. So we said, let's get into our car, if it's still there, and let's head out to our house. They said, okay, fine. So we got into our vehicle. Thank God it was still on the road. And it was a van, and I removed the seats of my van previous to coming up to Baguio because I was transporting items. We just purchased a new condominium and we were furnishing it, so I needed the space in my van. So we got in our van and we looked out in the horizon, and we were saying, what happened to the Hyatt Hotel? It's gone from the horizon. It's not there. And
that's where you guys just were eating.
We were just eating there. So the parents of our friends notified them that they were going to be at the Hyatt Hotel because they too had friends who were staying at the hotel. So somehow we said, okay, let's head out to the Hyatt. When we head out to the Hyatt, we realized that the lobby where we were having our snack, our coffee, was under a mezzanine, a cement mezzanine, and that mezzanine collapsed like sandwich, and everybody who was eating in that lobby died. No survivors. We also heard after the fact that the Cannon Road that we were supposed to go down or take down to the lowlands, Cannon Road experienced 15 to 16 landslides. And these landslides are such that people who were saying who were spared or who survived, they were saying that they were, let's say, behind a bus. And when that landslide came, the bus simply disappeared from before their eyes. I mean, and there was no more road, and they were stranded. So what are the chances that, we would have been down Cannon Road if we decided to go down earlier?
If you didn't stop at this silver shop.
And experience all those landslides, I don't know what a slim chance of even surviving. We get to the Hyatt, of course, we saw the mezzanine collapse, but the entire structure of the Hyatt, which was like layers it's like storied layers of floors, just collapsed like a domino. And, it was gone. I mean, it was completely leveled.
Now, this is, just for those that are new here, catching the talk, this was in 1990.
Yeah, 1990.
Yeah. You and Mom were vacationing in this mountain region in the Philippines called Baguio. They experienced an 8.5 magnitude earthquake. Your children, your 3 kids, my older brother, me, and Becca, we were left with Grandma in the city.
Right.
And this is back before there were cell phones, right?
Right. Yeah.
No cell phones.
No cell phones.
What happened to the landlines there? Was it all power outage immediate? The
landlines were operational. As I said, we were able to contact our friends who had parents. We were able to, but then it just that system, the landline system, collapsed.
So you weren't able to get a hold of us.
No.
And Lola and any of them.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So while we are in the middle of this horrific event, of course, in the back of our minds, we're thinking, whatever happened to our families, our kids down in Manila? I mean, if this was like a huge earthquake, I mean, they should have definitely felt it. Would they be under furniture? Would they have even survived the initial shock? I mean, we were so lost because we didn't have communication. Anyway, but we would have to shelf that emotion to get through our own situation. Of course, as I said, when we got to the Hyatt Hotel, the whole building was leveled. It was evening time, and usually after a traumatic experience like that, people are feeling cold. After the adrenaline wears out, they feel cold. They're looking for warmth. They built a huge bonfire for the guests of the Hyatt that survived. And Malu, my wife and myself, I said, I need to get busy. I need to help. or you could just go crazy, just mulling over your situation. So my wife and her friend went to the bonfire. We felt that they were safe already among the other guests, and my friend and I decided let's help. And it's a good thing that my friend is a local. He lives in Baguio, so he understands where everything is. So, as the bodies started coming out, I backed up my van, opened it up, and we started loading the van with these bodies, the survivors, the casualties. We didn't know whether they were even dead or alive, but we just made do because it started getting dark. We didn't have the equipment to figure out. Just maybe checking their pulses and seeing if they were alive. We load up at least 6 to 7 bodies into the van, closed it up, and I said to my friend, okay, where's the nearest hospital? I said, well, let's go to the Baguio General Hospital. And going to the Baguio General Hospital, remember that there now is a power outage. There's no lights, there's no... the stoplights are down, the police are busy doing other things, so you're literally on your own. So we're headed down to the Baguio General Hospital. Through this traffic, trying to make our way, weaving and winding through this traffic, we get to the hospital. And as we're doing this, there are people in the back of the van moaning and crying out and all in pain. We get to the hospital, and people are like lined up in the streets. There are bodies in the streets, in the sidewalks of the hospital. I rush in. There's a team of doctors with a makeshift emergency room that they set up with lamps to illuminate whatever to help them. I asked the doctor, we've got casualties in the van, where do we place them? And he says, we have no place. If you can, as you can see, we're full of victims. So where will I put them? If they would be next in line? He says, well, if you could leave them in the sidewalk, and we'll tend to them. We'll just have an orderly tend to them. So that's what we had to do. We had to leave these bodies and carefully put them on the sidewalk. They issued them, gave us some blankets, so we put blankets on them, make them as comfortable as possible. And I just told Carlo, a friend of mine, come on, let's get back in the van, let's go back to the hotel. So we make our way back to the hotel, only to find that there were more victims, but this time, the first responders to our situation were the American military medics. They came in with jackhammers. They came in with sledgehammers. They've got the equipment. They came in with doctors, with the medical gear that was needed, and then they started to load our van again with victims, with the casualties. But this time, they had the saline. They would hook it up from inside the van. They would have already put the syringe and such, preparing the bodies so that they could already be prepared and prepped, so that when they get to the emergency room, at least they are, it's some form of aid that's given them. Moaning, groaning, they were throwing up inside the van. It was just like
mess,
horrific. Yeah. So we kept
How many of
home.
these runs did you make?
Maybe 2 or 3 runs, if I'm not mistaken.
They're just bodies in your van.
Yeah, and so when we went back to the general hospital, they said we can't. We're maxed out. I said, where's the next best? And they said, go down to the Philippine Military Academy. They have a makeshift hospital that you can take these victims to. So that was a trip. We had to go down another way to the academy. And when we get to the gate of the academy, and it's probably already like 2, 3 in the morning, there were soldiers, armed soldiers who trained their rifles at us, I guess because they were scavengers, there were people who were stealing at that point. nobody was to be trusted, and I had to show them that I had victims that needed to get tended to. So they opened the gates. They checked of course, they flashlight checked our occupants, and then pointed us to the medics who were waiting for victims. So we got the victims there, unloaded the van. That time we were already exhausted. And
was this the same day? This was all same day.
All same day.
This had happened.
Remember, this is already past midnight, right? 2 in the morning and such. So after getting them to the doctors, we jumped back into the van, headed back up to Hyatt. Of course, we have our wives were waiting for us at the Hyatt. By the time we got to the Hyatt with all the traffic and everything, you guys must understand our van was already,
empty.
A quarter of a tank. That's why for me, I have this thing that, if you live in earthquake country, you always have to have a full tank of gas. I will never be caught with a quarter tank of gasoline. It's a nightmare.
Every time my dad gets into my car since I started driving, if he sees that it's under a half, you get irritated with me.
But in a time of crisis like an earthquake, forget gasoline. I mean, there were lines of cars for gasoline. All the gasoline stations were sucked up out of gasoline, finished. On day one, you're done. No more gasoline in the entire city. No more water in the entire city. You're really on your own. So, at a quarter tank, I had to nurse it. I'm counting mileage as I'm doing this, get to the Hyatt, making sure my wife is safe, our wives are safe. I got out of the van. It was already like 4 in the morning after going through all that. And it was kind of like brightening up a little bit. I could see this guy walking, through the rubble. And he looked kind of familiar. And when I looked at him, I said, I realized who he was, and I called out his name, and I said, how are you? How are you doing? And he said, he told me, Jakey, I stayed at the Hyatt. I had like 5 of my best friends at the Hyatt. He says, they're all dead. And I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm just in a fog. And like a zombie, he just walked past me and just maybe, alone with his thoughts, trying to process what had just happened. And that was that. I mean, that's the last time I saw him. But that's how people were. They were in shock at what had just happened. Now, on my end, I had all cylinders running. I was still on adrenaline, expecting more bodies, but that all subsided when they were able to get all the casualties that they could. So I had to rest. We got our wives back in the van, and we moved towards the home of my friend. And they lived in the city in an area called, it was like a retreat center called Haven of Rest. His mom was very resourceful. She would can stuff, she would sell stuff. I mean, that was her sideline type of a business. And we stayed at their home, but mind you, in this situation, every half hour there were tremors, non-stop. Yeah, these are called aftershocks, and this was going on throughout the evening. And some of these aftershocks were so strong, like maybe a 6.5, that you'd think that this is the big one, And so you're kind of walking on eggshells thinking, okay, when's the next one? When's the next one? So even in the home of my friend, we didn't sleep on the bed. We slept underneath the door jamb because the earth kept moving and shifting. And that's where we slept. And we just really couldn't sleep, I mean, with all of this happening.
Mom didn't even want to shower, you said. She just didn't want to do anything.
She was thinking, if I go to the bathroom, and an earthquake catches me and things collapse, I'm going to get stuck. So we had to stay at the entry areas to have easy access to exit the home. and of course, like day two, they were the mother had bread. That they had bread, they had sausages and such. So that's what we were eating. And then in the evening we had a little bit of that. But mind you, as time went on, we had our rations were slowly depleting. And I also remember, I forgot to mention that, after the initial quake happened and we were making our way to the Hyatt Hotel, there were hordes of people, a mass population of people leaving the city. As we were entering the city, they were just all around our van, us and them making way through each other. And I see even my first cousin who was walking, exiting the city. I said, "Hey, where are you headed?" I'm headed back to. We had a family farm, which was outside the city, and he said, "There are no cars, there are no transport, so I'm walking it." I remember stuff like that, And at day two, when we walked around, we had to look and see what was going on. You could smell formaldehyde. I think this is what they use to embalm dead bodies, and many of that stench was coming from the homes of their loved ones who passed away. They just kept these loved ones in their homes. Lights on. You could hear crying. You could hear wailing. Many people suffered the loss of lives of their loved ones. You're exposed to all of that. And the thing is, guys, even on day two, there's no help. The government, they're paralyzed. No help is coming. Day three came out. They had to bring out some firearms to protect the property because there were looters. A lot of these homes that we were living around were summer homes. Nobody was occupying it. So there were a lot of break-ins. People were looting these homes for food, for water, for supplies. And we had to bring out the firearms, the dogs of the property to protect the property from looters, from vandals, from thieves, burglars. And that was day two. Day three, yet no government help coming. We got word that there were telephones, landlines that were installed in the city. So we decided, okay, let's make it out to the city. We need to communicate with my family to find out how my family is, how our kids are. If they have landlines available, great.
So this is 3 days you hadn't had contact with anybody outside.
Yeah.
So you didn't know if your kids were dead or alive.
Right. No television, no radio, nothing, no communication. So we go to the city. There's a place called Session Road. And the telephone company installed, thank God, 3 lines for people to use. 3 lines for the entire population to use. We get there and you've got lines that are wrapping around the streets. I mean, when I said, if I line up, I'm not even going to get to these lines till the next day. That's how bad it was. So I'm trying to figure out how can I do this, and then I spot a telephone guy. He had one of those hand carry Motorola's. It's
in a briefcase.
Huge. Yeah, it's huge. You carry it this way, and I knew that was a live phone, and he had the telephone company on his shirt. So I went up to him, and I had to be resourceful. I had to talk to him. I shared my experiences. I was talking to him and trying to gain his confidence and such. And then he looks at me in the middle of our conversation. He says, "Did you want to use a phone? Did you want to use my phone and call?" I said, "If I can, could I?" He said, "Sure." And he opened his phone, and I was able to use his Motorola phone, call my family, and immediately my family said, "Look, we're able to get a helicopter, and we were able to get a pilot, and the helicopter, the pilot, your brother are on it, and they're going to search for you, and they're going to start in Cannon Road because they figured that was the time that you were going down to the lowlands." And I said, "No, we're not at Cannon. and I gave them the location. It was a great thing that we were able to connect, because my brother would be lost looking for us on Cannon Road, which is that zigzag road. And how would you find anybody with 15, 16 landslides? So they communicate that information to my brother. He was able to get that information, and when they landed in the Baguio airport, he had to walk from the Baguio airport to where we were. And by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we see him, and he said, "We don't have much time. The helicopter is at the airstrip. It's waiting for us. It's all fueled up and ready to go. But we have to rush because there are people who are wanting
to
rides
get on it
out." So I said, "Okay, let's use my vans." We all jumped into the van, and with what little fuel we had left, I had my friend drive it. Right, we drive to the airport, and there's this chain link fence, and there's people grabbing onto the chain link fence and shaking it this way. They're holding wads of money, waiting to get any air transport out of Baguio. They'll pay whatever they can to get out, and they're shaking and they're shouting and crying out for help, whatever. So we had to casually make our way to the fence, to the entrance of the fence, and we could see the helicopter at a distance at the end of the airstrip. I guess the guy turned off the engine and made it as if the helicopter was not functioning. And the minute he saw us walking down the airstrip, that's the time he started to turn on the blades of the chopper. As the blades started to run, we started to run. The doors popped open. We all ran and jumped into the chopper. People were making their way out of the fence towards the chopper, but we were able to run faster. The chopper took off, and we were able to, evacuate in safety. And I guess that's, we're just still holding out until after we got home in Manila, in our home. We were living in a building back home, and only then did we discover that our kids were alive, that our families were alive. They were able to weather that earthquake. Only then were we able to gather around as a family and pray for thanks. That's the only time I think I broke down and cried a bucket, because that's when reality sinks in and said, well, I was able to survive. We were able to survive. We were able to get through this. But then again, when you are in an earthquake situation, you have to have presence of mind.
You're louder because the AC is on.
You have to presence of mind in saying, I'm going to survive this. I'm not going to die today, And of course, for those of you who are depending on sustenance or safety from an outside source, for me it was the Lord God, and you say that in a prayer, to Him. So that presence of mind, and then the need to help people, because if you are just looking to yourselves, you just be paralyzed by fear, overwhelmed by fear, and you can't move, you can't decide, you can't make choices and decisions. And so you have to have at least those two components: presence of mind and
helping,
and that need to help people and get busy, and do something, because if not, again, you're going to be lost. And again, in that presence of mind, you have to be able to think, through and say, hey, even in day 3, we're not going to receive any semblance of help from our government. We are on our own, and this is how we have to behave. This is how we have to get through this. 3 days, 5 days, whatever it takes. You're on your own, so you've got to be about your wits and figure out ways and means of being able to survive this. I mean, I was even thinking, since I was even out of gas, I was even thinking of setting aside some monies to purchase these what they call Baguio ponies, horses, to make it down to the lowlands. I mean, I was already thinking in that area, looking at maps, looking at the terrain, looking at alternative routes, stuff like that. Again, know your city, know the
what do they call topography maps?
the topography, know the routes.
They sell those maps still all over Amazon. Like you would need to, you need to get yourself a map of at least your area and your state. I think they're like $20 per state for those kind of maps, because these are all going to be the actual terrain, like actual places that you would take when freeways are down, when the roads you're used to are not functioning. Right.
And always just be prepared. Read up. I mean, in the internet, there's all kinds of prepared ways to be prepared for earthquakes. I mean, read up on the material. There's so much out there. So I don't want to be redundant and tell you what you need to have. It's all there.
For now.
Just remember that, an earthquake, a good jacket, you'll get cold, your adrenaline wears out, you'll be freezing. First aid kits, always put it in you have that in your vehicle at all times. Always have a full tank of gas. It's always good to be prepared in that way. I mean, what if you have to make it out to the city? It's not that easy. You're going to face major traffic. You need as much fuel as you can if you're going to need to get out into a safer place. So those are the things that I remember, and when you are there, exposed to victims, exposed to dead bodies, you just have to get over that, and be able to see beyond that, and
don't let it paralyze you.
Don't let it paralyze you. Don't let it, I don't want to say, but don't let that stop you or bother you or become an obstacle to you. Just have to move forward with your life. You're alive. Move forward with your life. If you can't help anymore, if you've exhausted any help that you could provide, move forward. Move on. So those are the things I remember that kept me going. And the rest of the rest will follow. Just that idea of like presence of mind. What was the second one I said?
Helping others.
Presence of mind and helping other people as you plow your way.
I was 1990, so then I was like 4 or 5 years old at the time, and all I remember was being in, what story was she on? She was on like,
you were on the 8th floor.
Yeah, we were in like a high up in like a condo with my grandmother's, and I just remembered everything shaking, and the maids that we were with grabbed my sister, who was still like in a crib. She's still like a baby. They grabbed her out of there. I just remembered she was napping, and we went into the hallway, and everything was still shaking, and all I remember is just 2 maids and the 3 of us kids running down an emergency stairwell. And we go outside, and there were people above us on the higher floors that the maids were covering our eyes because people were jumping out of these buildings all around us. So as kids, we were watching bodies fly out of buildings. Like, they were just...
Yeah.
That was just crazy. And I just remember that they were like trying to, censor us from witnessing that kind of stuff. And then we just didn't know where you guys were for a few days.
Yeah. Well, the aftermath was the buildings, interestingly, collapsed because of the rocky motion. Our earthquakes in Asia are a rocky motion. Unlike the California quakes, which go up and down, it's like a wave. The California quake is like a wave that goes up and down. It passes you, you hear it, you hear the rumble, and then it trails off. Us, it's up and down. It's sideways like a boat. It's just an unstable boat, And buildings collapsed onto itself. It didn't fall. Most of them collapsed onto itself from its base down. So I don't know, it seems as though the Japanese say when there's an earthquake, you run up, because that's the floor that's preserved as it goes down. But in our thinking, you run down to safety, which may be wrong. You got to explore that even further, the way buildings are built today. But that's what I remember. And the aftermath, they had helicopter shots of the entire city of the Baguio, and shops and buildings were completely leveled or turned upside, and apparently we were not that far away from the epicenter. I think the epicenter was in Dagupan City, which also suffered a whole lot in terms of building structures and such. And we were maybe about 100 miles away from the epicenter. But since we were on a mountain, the quake is even stronger when you're up there. But that probably was one of the strongest quakes that we ever experienced. My life was spared in not having to stay too long in the hotel lobby eating. We just had a quick coffee and left. That lobby collapsed. Everybody there dead. I was spared from going down Cannon Road, which is a major road, a zigzag road that gets you to the lowlands. Suffered 15 to 16 landslides. I was spared from that. So somehow, you look back at that, and I've got this new lease on life. The Lord spared me, and there's purpose in that. When you have a sense that your life had been spared, and I'm thankful that I'm able to do what I was called to do. I pastor and I teach, and God had plans for me. I'm not saying that He favored me and didn't favor, but that is how it was revealed to me that I was spared for a purpose, and I don't take that lightly. I do what I can to fulfill that purpose that the Lord has spared me from, or spared me for. That in a nutshell is
the story. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then flash forward to a year later, we move to America, and we go to this place called Universal Studios. And we go on a tram, and they have a new feature on this tram ride called Earthquake.
Right.
That we didn't know about.
Based on the movie, on the film. Earthquake.
And this is like the following year, like to the day, like to the week.
And it was in July, the month of July.
My mom on this ride, because like the tram stops in this tunnel, and it tries to simulate an
earthquake, a 6.5 earthquake, I think.
I think my mom, all the color in her face left her. She pretty much turned white.
Yeah, she cried.
She was crying on this ride.
Memories.
And, since then, too, she's been pretty paralyzed in earthquake-type situations, because then the following year, right, or was it that same summer, we had to deal with Northridge earthquake. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Northridge quakes in the 90s, but even for that one, I just remember you kept saying, get a hold of yourself.
Yeah.
Because she just becomes paralyzed in those kind of situations, and meanwhile you're grabbing us in the middle of the night. The house was shaking. I just remembered my dad running through the hallway, putting jackets over me and my sister and brother, and making us stay underneath doorways.
Yeah.
Along with little flashlights and little you just kind of kept us there because of going through that.
I don't know, guys. When it comes to major catastrophes like earthquakes and violent storms, and these are near-death experiences, it will really bring out your character and how you will respond to such events. You will either respond in fear or in faith. I mean, there's just two responses. And if you respond in fear, you will be paralyzed. You will be rendered useless. You will just be thinking of saving yourself. I mean, initially, that's the instinct, to save yourself. But then you will be so consumed about just you and you alone But if it's by faith, it opens you up to a world of, yeah, I will survive this. I will help other people. I will get through this. So, I don't know. It's these things will test you. It will test you and see how will you respond and be paralyzed by the situation, or will you overcome the situation and be of help to other people? There's this really fine line between the two. Either you're fear-based or faith-based, and it will really, you will discover who you are during such events.
So not that your methods are perfect or always right, but growing up, Dad would put us through like stress tests and just like tests as kids, like I'd be in the kitchen, and I remember that one time you were throwing, it was like a paper cup or a paper plate. You were going to throw that towards the back, but I was not facing you. So I must have been like 8 or 9. And you would say from the kitchen door, I remember this in Pasadena, you go, "Talia, duck!" And I didn't duck. I turned around and I got hit by this paper cup. And he was just like, he's like, "See, you would just be dead. You'd be done." I'm like, what the heck? But you would just put us through these little, you go, "You have to trust me, or you're not going to trust me." He goes, "Now I know in an emergency situation, I got to be very specific with you, Sometimes you only get to give people one warning."
Yeah.
And I would have, I'm starting to do that now with my kids to see if they...
Yeah, I mean, maybe in your group, there would probably be the one person who may be the more experienced. That's the voice that you listen to. That's what you respond to. The decisions that you're making are split second. And then on top of that, on top of all this experience that I'm sharing with you, one thing is clear. You are not in control. Control out the window. Nothing. You are not in the driver's seat anymore. And so, again, we are a society that we are so control-oriented. We need to get our hands on this. I'm sorry, in such situations, that's over. That's finished. You're not in control. And so you've got to be about your wits and try to figure this out the best way you can. What do I say? Just work with what's before you, and move forward and get through this. And have that will, to be able to say, I'm going to weather this, I'm going to survive this, I'm going to get through this, and keep that in check, so that you do, as much as nothing is in your control, you will be able to get through this and see the next day. So that's pretty much.
Yeah, and then everything from then on was tests and. Every room we'd go to, situation, you got to kind of know the exit and know that. I know it's an interesting way of growing up, but that's kind of how we had to grow up because of what you guys went through. We were always just ready, always ready to leave town. And you don't have time this morning, but maybe the next visit or something you could talk about what life was like with because we grew up in a time in the Philippines under martial law. So we had actual curfews at night. We had an actual dictator of a president. And what that was like, because that went on for a couple decades, right? Martial law. So you just were always prepared. I have people that are like, "Why do your kids have passports?" I mean, we had passports at what age? It was literally as soon as...
Yeah, when you were babies.
As soon as we were out.
All your documents in order.
Everything was ready.
Yeah. If you go to hotels, I mean, we stay in hotels. I'm always looking, at the hotel in the door. You have a map of all the exits, and people take those maps for granted. I read the maps. I try to make sure I know where those exits are. In time of those situations, there's a power outage. You can't see. Sometimes you're in the dark. You have to have flash. I don't know why I always take a flashlight with me, because you'll have to look down those alleyways and figure out where the exits are. I mean, again, I said just be aware of your environment, be aware of the exits.
That's true. Most people go into a hotel room, they check in, they flip the book. Okay, how does this TV work? My dad sits every hotel we go to, even today.
Study the exits.
He sits alone off to the side and he's studying exits and like what to do on the in case of, but that's, I guess, just already ingrained in you from what you've been through. So.
Yeah. If there's one thing that the Boy Scouts prepared you for, it's be prepared, I mean, that's their motto, right? Be prepared. So I'm just saying, just a friendly reminder, we live in earthquake country, be prepared, go through the internet, bring out your kits. If you got those safety kits, those emergency kits or bins that you have, just keep them situated at the nearest exit. Because if the entire house collapses, at least you have those exits where it's easy to retrieve those bins or what have you. Water, supplies, and such, yeah.
It's better to have a plan than not.
Yeah.
So can we close with something kind of like promising, not just so like drab and sad. Obviously, we can't live in fear. And how does that make you? Just
again, if it's your time, it's your time. And when I was in Baguio, there were many people whose time was up. Okay, and that's a given that I accept. Our days are numbered. I do know that, I'm just trying to figure, teach us, I think it was Moses in Psalm 90, verse 12, teach us to number our days that we may have a heart of wisdom. That would help. Our days are numbered. We don't live forever. We're not immortal. Sometimes when you're young, 20, 30 years old, you think you're going to live forever, but you're not immortal. You're mortal. I've lost friends and family, car accidents and what have you, when they were young. And so, just remember that your days have been numbered in such a way that your life is wired to make God known as many days as He's given you, whether He's given you up to 30 years old, 40 years old, 70 years old. Your role is to make God known, and ultimately when we go from this earth, to enjoy Him, to enjoy God forever. I think that's the Westminster creed or something. Make God known, or glorify God and enjoy Him forever. So I hope that would encourage you a little bit. I know I have other verses that haven't come to mind yet, but maybe we'll get there in another podcast. Yeah.
Podcast.
Is it a podcast? What is this?
It's an Instagram Live.
There you go.
But okay. Well, that being said, have a safe drive to California, even though I don't want you guys to go back this week. I can't prevent that.
Yeah, you can't.
My negotiation skills are not up to par with yours.
Well, yeah. California, I mean, sometimes, we try to get away, like our living conditions, life here, it's going to crumble on us. Let's move to another state. Let's move away from disaster. Let's move away to safety, what have you. I think the better perspective would be choosing to live in an area, right? Choosing to live not where it's comfortable to live, but where it is important for you to live. How God sees that. Where is it important for you to live according to God's perspective? And that's a challenge for all of us. Sometimes we want to live and preserve our lives the best way we can. And when we start to do that, again, being control-oriented, we get encumbered by that, and it can stifle us. But when you choose to live where God called you to live, where it's important for you to live, that is that is, I believe, the better way. I mean, we can live in a war-torn country, but if that is where God has called us to live, then you better be sure to live there and make God known there, because He's given you the faculties, the facilities, the gifts, the talent, the skill to live in such times and such circumstances. And again, here's a good thing. A missionary named Fraser, he said, the Christian's life is immortal until his or her work is done. Our lives are immortal until our work is done. So wherever we are found, whether it is in a war-torn or earthquake situation, our life in Christ is immortal until we completed the work that He created us for. And that being said, we can trust God for our lives, even in the worst of situations.
That's true. That's true. This is until we all retire in the Ozarks, right?
We have to pray about all those
I would have
words.
started this live so much earlier today, but we spent the hour before this live arguing with each other because obviously they're on board. My parents are on board with the whole vaccine topic, right? That took 5 years. But we're still iffy when it comes to things like the moon landing and like Antarctica and like all these. So we argue, but it's like a healthy arguing. But I mean, it did get loud down there, mostly because of me. But we were all just kind of like,
Yeah, we can argue. We argue about stuff that's really peripherals, not the priorities. But
I know, I'm like, these aren't hills we're going to die on, but I'm like, you guys need to research this. They're like, you need to research this. And it was like this back and just,
But guys,
whatever.
when the S hits the fan, all of that
Doesn't matter.
Just washes, and you're left with. I think it was Jesus who said, he told Peter, only one thing is important. That is the one thing that you need to be mindful of. Life. Only one thing is important. Sometimes we burden ourselves with so much that is so cloudy and so foggy, we really can't see our priorities.
I know, but it's fun to look into and
I'm not saying don't explore that. Do so by all means.
But you
just
can't
remember,
explore Antarctica. Yeah. They won't let you.
Yeah. Okay, Admiral Perry.
All right.
We'd like to sign off.
We're going to say bye and get the kids.
Get
Okay.
Yeah.
Bye, guys. I'll be back on later today.